Welcome to r/MaliciousCompliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter but not the spirit of request. Thank you to all subscribers who support the channel. It means a lot for me. Today we have 3 good stories. And the first story is, the time I got my manager a promotion, so he quit. I'm going to have to be a little vague on some details to protect myself here, so I can't discuss the type of business, etc. So it's going to be a struggle. This is a lot of background to explain the kind of situation that developed over a decade. A place that was once truly fun to work at and easy to earn a bit of extra overtime became a dog-eat-dog struggle to survive. The low-level peons like me were split between those who felt disenfranchised and hated by the management, those that were basically looking for an escape route, and that group of snakes who would smile to your face and act sympathetic to your situation before sneaking away to inform the managers of anything they had learned which might have value. We were in a specific area of the business that was isolated and slowly being replaced by technology. So from over 1,000 in our building, it dropped to just around 250 when I left. Most of this was done through voluntary redundancy, but the managers were given incentive to fire as many people as possible to save money on VR. And since managers' jobs were also slowly being cut, they were desperate to fire as many as possible, but most were incapable of following procedure. Mike was that intelligent and brutal kind of manager who, like the others, had been promoted into the position, but knowing he wouldn't get trained officially, took it upon himself to become competent. The man had gotten dozens of people fired directly and more indirectly by helping less competent managers follow the correct procedure. A certain quantity of work at a certain level of quality was required, which everyone met. Yet they had a bottom and top 10 list, and if you were on the bottom 10 list, your job was on the line regardless if you met the basic requirements. Since there was always a bottom 10 by definition, there were always 10 people on the firing line. This might be vague, but it has to be. Mike's team was a sort of clearinghouse for the bottom 10. We were shifted between shifts and teams for various reasons, but what I quickly learned is that somehow the shift's bottom 10 were all on Mike's team. Now, my performance was consistently in the top 10, so I was safe on that count, but my attendance was low due to health issues, and my attitude was really bad. I also learned that the rest of the team was made up of people who weren't low in performance, but had low attendance and attitude problems just like me, and we had all been on the chopping block by managers who failed to follow procedure. In short, Mike was the executioner of the workforce. The most vulnerable to being fired were shifted around to his team so he could succeed where the others had failed. Sooner or later, my time came. My health caused a series of absences, while I had hospitalizations, and Mike pounced into action. In the space of a year, he made 7 attempts to fire me, and each time I involved HR, who stepped in and protected me. I approached HR to make a case that what was happening was wrong, not just to me, but to everyone. I made the case that the situation of Mike being the executioner created a hostile work environment, and the fact that I had gotten his attempts to fire me thrown out proved that he was not only hostile, but was actively toxic. That it was against the law to discriminate on age or disability, and a myriad of other arguments. I was told that there was nothing they could do. Mike was untouchable and had the full support of the upper management in our building because he was saving a lot of money in voluntary redundancy payouts by firing the vulnerable. Legally, there might be a case that it would have to go through a court system and not through HR unless I had an example of him being hostile and abusive. The person I spoke to was very sympathetic, and he suggested I look into some things related to job opportunities that were coming up. He mentioned that many of them were managerial positions because a new type of roaming manager had been introduced. These were very needed and weren't getting much interest. Think substitute teacher, where a manager gets sent all around the country at the drop of a hat. It didn't occur to me instantly, but weeks later as I sat at work listening to Mike talk about his family, it clicked into place, and my plan began to take form. Instead of making a complaint, I gave a glowing review and had several others do the same. If we couldn't get the man fired for his actions, we could get him promoted into a job that he couldn't take. The managers in our area were not even being considered for transfers because they lacked the training and qualifications to be managers anywhere else. Our reviews might just push him over the line into getting a promotion, and since roaming managers were being sought, the two should dovetail nicely. We didn't give the reviews to our management, but directly higher up the food chain, way above anyone that ever dealt with our area of the business. Each of us mentioned that Mike had done an amazing job at sorting out problems, etc., had great managerial skills, and an in-depth knowledge of procedure. Then we sat back and waited. A few months went by with nothing happening, and I thought the attempt had failed. But then we came into Mike losing his mind. He was shouting at the shift manager, his boss, about how he wasn't being given a choice. Turns out the higher management had gotten our reviews, looked into his record, and decided he was a perfect fit for the roaming manager position. Since they were in the process of getting rid of managers in our area, they insisted that Mike be pushed into it. Mike had of course tried to refuse the promotion, as was his right, but the higher management had made it a choice of accept the promotion or be demoted back to peon. Mike had a family and couldn't just uproot them whenever the company needed him elsewhere, and a demotion with a pay cut back into the workforce of people who despised him and that were slowly being culled was just as bad. So he asked for voluntary redundancy instead and was accepted. His last day he went berserk, shouting and swearing about how badly the company had treated him after all he had done. I was unfortunately absent for it, but got a play-by-play and loved every second of it. Since I was told explicitly that I couldn't get him punished or fired, I got him a promotion he couldn't accept instead. The second story is, new hire misses most of the first 3 weeks of work, then uses me as a reference. Let's call her Karen just because it fits. She came in and applied for a job, and when I looked at her resume and application, I realized she knew some of my old neighborhood friends and schoolmates. She interviewed well, so I gave her a job. Told her to be in Monday at 9 a.m. Monday morning she is not in. She no calls, no shows. Tuesday, no call, no show. I had now written her off. Wednesday, she shows up about noon. Claims she was in her basement Sunday night and her brother was working out and he accidentally knocked her out during his intense workout. She claimed her doctor told her she had a concussion and she should stay home for a couple of days. She had no doctor's note, no marks on her head, but thinking her story was so off the wall it could almost be true, I let her come to work the next day. She worked Thursday and Friday. We paid at the end of every week and I gave her a check Friday. I also did not deduct the days she missed. She came to me and asked about the full paycheck. I told her we were a family business and realized people had lives outside work. He tried to make sure people knew they were appreciated and tried to take care of our people. She teared up and thanked me and said we could count on her. She worked the full next week, did okay. She seemed to fit in. Seemed. The third week she showed up Monday, but Tuesday was another no show, no call. We did not hear from her for over 2 weeks. When she finally showed up, her story was the stuff of legends. She claimed her husband had forged divorce papers a couple years previous. Thinking she was divorced, she moved back into her parents' house. She claimed her ex-husband was at her parents' house when she got home the last night she worked. He told her he made up the divorce and the paperwork was phony, so they were still married, and he wanted to get back together. She claimed she refused, and he kidnapped her. She said it took her until a couple days ago to get away from him. She wanted to come into work the next day. She did not call the police and he wasn't arrested. There was nothing in the papers or on the news about any of this. She was not hurt, thank God. She asked if I believed her. I did not, but told her that I really needed someone I could count on coming in reliably every day. I gave her a paycheck for 1 week. She had worked 1 day and told her I wished her good luck. I had already replaced her, and a replacement was one of the best employees we ever had. Here's the malicious compliance. The next month, I come into a phone message that someone from XXX company called for a reference for Karen. As my secretary is handing me the message, she's laughing at the look on my face. I asked if she was kidding. She said she was not. She said she got a call from a man saying he was the owner of a company in the area, and he asked about Karen. Then my secretary asked if she could listen in on the call. She was a pistol. She then goes and gets my partner and tells him I'm going to call and give Karen a reference. Now he's in my office laughing too. I call the guy and we make some small talk. I tell him what we do, and he tells me what he wants Karen to do for him. I tactfully avoided answering any of his questions about Karen directly. I think he was beginning to suspect something. Remember folks, employers can get in a ton of trouble for bad references. He finally asked my opinion of Karen, and what I said was, if you can get Karen to work for you, you will be very lucky. He heard what I said and how I said it. He repeated that back to me exactly as I said it. All my words were the right ones. It was my tone and intonation that got my point across. He thanked me and hung up. Karen comes into the office a couple days later. She looks mad, but is trying to be pleasant. She told me she's having trouble finding a job and mentioned she's used me as a reference. She wanted to know if anyone from XXX company has called me. She knew they did. She told me she really wants the job at XXX company. I told her I had been called and that I told the guy he'd be lucky to get her to work for him. My secretary confirmed that's what I told him. She told him she was right next to me during the whole conversation. Karen smiled and thanked me and headed to the door. She said she wondered why she was having so much trouble getting a job. She asked if she could continue to use me for a reference, and I told her absolutely. I also told her I'd tell everyone the same thing, that any employer would be lucky if they can get you to work for them. She walked away smiling, happy, and clueless. The last story is, show up to work in a hurricane or be fired? How about no? A short one, but this is the story of how I grew a backbone. This happened a few years ago. I worked at a cheap chain restaurant. There are 3 total in my country here. It is important to note that the company was founded in a northern state of the US, and they are still headquartered there. Well, one year, hurricane season was in full swing, and a right monster of one was looking to make a direct hit. I've lived in this state most of my life, and anything below a Cat 3 is just an annoyance. But this sucker was a Cat 4 and still several days out. Everyone in the county was freaking out. Landfall is supposed to be Friday, and it's Monday. Everything was selling out quickly, which just made people more panicked. My house is older and not very strong, so I'm very worried. And of course, everyone at work is wondering when our store is going to close. Monday, several employees, including myself, are concerned that people have been scheduled for Friday. Management, we have to get authorization from HQ to close. Me, well, do they understand it's a Cat 4? I need to get packed up and go to my boyfriend's house. Management, if we remain open, you have to find someone to cover your shift. Tuesday, we hear that the other 2 stores are being closed because they're both in mandatory evacuation areas. Coworker, why are we still going to be open even though the other 2 are closing? Management, they have to. We don't. HQ hasn't authorized it. Me, okay, but just because the store is in a safe location doesn't mean that the roads getting here will be. We need to close. Management, look, I'm not happy either, but we have to wait for HQ. Wednesday morning, several people are calling out already, or just flat out quitting. Management, okay, just a reminder to everyone that if you're a no-call, no-show, you'll be fired. Me, seriously? HQ is keeping us open? Management, well, they said that since the storm is supposed to hit the next town over, we're not closing. Me, do they understand how a hurricane even works? Our governor is urging everyone to evacuate if they're able to. Management, well, we're having a conference call with them tomorrow morning to make the decision then. Me, and if they say no? Management, then you have to show up or be fired. During that shift, myself and most of the employees joined together and said we would all call out. Can't fire everyone at once, right? One by one, we went into the office and told them that we wouldn't be coming in until Monday, or we quit. Since it was show up in the middle of a hurricane or be fired. Those who weren't working that day called in and said the same. Well, they had that conference call very early Thursday morning, and lo and behold, HQ was gracious enough to allow us to close. Only issue is that management now had to prepare the building by themselves, being that the rest of us had already gone inland or to shelters. We would have been glad to help Tuesday or Wednesday when we actually had time to do so. But no, management nor corporate wanted to listen to reason. We were extremely lucky, as the storm turned away literally at the last minute, and we were spared the worst of it. However, when the next hurricane came around, corporate was very quick to tell us to close 2 days before landfall. Thank you for watching, guys. Have a nice day.